This video is produced in collaboration with Environmental Defense. Stay tuned to learn how you can help get more riders on public transit.
Cities are great, but what's even more exciting is when entire regions of the planet get tied together with high-quality public transit, with multiple cities and rapid transit systems being interconnected into a mega-region. There are a lot of amazing mega-regions out there, from the Tokyo-Osaka corridor in Japan to almost all of Western Europe and the Northeast corridor in the United States. In all of these cases, numerous different cities, transport systems, airports, and universities are interconnected with fast electric trains. But what's really cool is to live in an era where you're in a new transit megalopolis that's emerging. So where is it, what is it, and how might it change in the future? Let's talk about it. This is RM Transit, a channel about cities and sometimes something even bigger. The Quebec City-Windsor corridor never made a ton of sense to me historically as a transit corridor. Sure, the corridor is linked up with airports and tons of highways, and it has a huge proportion of Canada's population. But comparing it to something like the US Northeast corridor has always felt silly. Until recently, this corridor had just 2 electric rail systems, which is the same number as Alberta, a province with 1/5 as many people. At the same time, while the corridor has tons of universities, for example, historically a lot of them haven't been connected up to rail, from the University of Waterloo to York, U-Ottawa, and McMaster. And then there's the airports. These are major transportation hubs, but even as recently as 2013, most of these major transportation hubs were served only by buses, with none of the airports in the Quebec City-Windsor corridor having a proper air-rail link connection. And no, a 1-kilometer walk through parking lots from the pitiful Montreal Airport train station does not count. What's crazy is what you see when you do compare this to, for example, the US Northeast, which truly deserves more credit than it ever gets outside of an Alan Fisher video for being a truly connected transit megalopolis. The Northeast corridor has just 11 grade crossings across the entire thing. If you're traveling on a train from Toronto to Montreal, you hit 11 grade crossings a little out of Oshawa. At the same time, the Northeast corridor is electric. Though amazingly, there are a bunch of situations where diesel trains run under wire, which is really bad and needs to be sorted out. What's much more positive is that the speeds on the corridor are generally really good. There are loads of stations, and it's connected up to 4 different subway systems as well as light rail in Baltimore. It also shares tracks with 7 different suburban train systems and connects to a bunch of airports directly. Canada, meanwhile, has a lot of work to do. The Quebec City-Windsor corridor isn't just less impressive on maps, it also manages to move an order of magnitude less people, because it's not an integrated system the way the Northeast corridor is. In the same way that a rapid transit system can perform better when it has tons of bus routes connecting to it and feeding passengers to it, an intercity rail corridor can perform better when it's tied into lots of rapid transit and rail systems. And the benefits cut both ways. You're a lot more likely to want to live in town without a car if you can go to the next town over without needing one. What's exciting is that this has begun to shift, and the idea of a Quebec City-Windsor transit mega-region has started to actually make some sense. Because a ton has actually happened in the last decade. We connected up York University and York Region to the Toronto subway system, and Waterloo Region got its own electric rail system, which connects its universities up to GO and VIA train services. And GO services have picked up a ton. 10 years ago, there was almost no all-day GO service. And now, most days, trains run all days to York Region, Hamilton, and even Brampton. There are also more daily rail and bus options to go to Waterloo Region, as well as to Niagara Falls. Union Station, which is a transit hub for all of Canada with trains to Windsor, Montreal, Ottawa, and Vancouver, as well as throughout the Toronto region, has also been completely transformed. It's busier than ever before, and more than ever, it's not just a place you pass through, but a destination in and of itself. It's a place that makes waiting for a train basically painless, because you've got shops, restaurants, and even a park that you can enjoy while you wait. Union also got a brand new indoor bus terminal a few years ago that brings all of the regional and intercity buses in downtown Toronto to a single location, where you can easily connect to intercity and regional trains, the subway system, as well as streetcars. And it's in a nicer space with more amenities. There's also really been a flourishing of intercity bus options, allowing you to easily connect through a much nicer terminal to places all across the eastern part of the country. And it's not just the GTHA. New rail links like O-Train Line 1 in Ottawa have seriously improved the calculus of taking VIA to that city, since you can easily connect to an electric rail service that'll take you right downtown, as well as to destinations like Ottawa. You can also say much the same thing for the REM branch to the South Shore in the Montreal region, which takes you straight to Central Station, where you can connect to VIA and regional trains, and connects tons of new destinations in the suburbs. If you're taking the train between cities, you're also increasingly getting a much nicer ride, since VIA's new trains have been rolling out. These new trains are great. They make the experience of riding a train in Canada feel just as modern as in Japan or Germany, even if they aren't quite so fast. But they look fast, so that's nice. The airports are also starting to get linked up. Pearson has had the Up Express service since 2015, and ever since we've fixed the kind of ridiculous initial fare scheme, it's been a really popular service, connecting Canada's biggest train and plane hubs. And a lot more is coming,
with many more projects and lines under construction or being planned. And this new transit is great and all, but without the necessary operating funding, we won't be able to run the service that is needed to actually serve the Canadians using these routes. As I've already talked about a lot on this channel if you're a frequent viewer, one of the best ways to reach our climate goals, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and slow down climate change is to increase public transit ridership. But that won't happen unless we provide much better service in addition to capital funding for building new projects. That's why I'm partnering with Environmental Defence, a leading Canadian environmental advocacy organization, to urge the Canadian federal government to provide operating funding for public transit systems all across the country, so that they can provide the fast, frequent, and reliable transit service people can depend on and that actually attracts riders to transit. Operating funding can look like paying operators and mechanics to keep vehicles in motion, and you can help us reach our target faster by signing the letter linked on screen and in the description so that you can have your voice heard as well. It doesn't take long and it really helps.
Under construction today are new O-Train and REM branches to connect to Ottawa and Montreal's airports respectively, which will double the number of rail-connected airports in Canada. Both of these train systems are also going to massively increase the reach of urban and suburban rail service in their respective cities when their current build-outs are complete, and that's going to transform transit in Ottawa and Montreal. In Quebec City, there are on-again, off-again talks about electric rail. And while the last tram plan came in with costs that were way too high, I'm sure the city can come up with a plan in the future that costs less and the government can come in with more funding and something can get done. In the GTHA, existing all-day rail service will extend much further, from Oshawa to Bowmanville, York to Barrie, Brampton to Kitchener, and from Hamilton to Grimsby and beyond. Pearson Airport will also become the first airport in Canada to have two air rail links when the Eglinton Crosstown eventually connects up its terminals with the Toronto subway system. And a lot is planned for smaller cities in Ontario as well. Waterloo Region is going through the motions of doing an extension of the Ion down to Cambridge, and Hamilton is getting its own tram system, which will allow you to connect to regional trains to Toronto, as well as to McMaster University and the football grounds. The Northlander is even coming back, which means for the first time ever, VIA won't be alone running modern, fast-looking intercity trains in Canada, but you'll also be able to get them on the Northlander, heading to Northern Ontario and connecting to the rest of Quebec City-Windsor. Of course, all of these changes do not get us to Northeast Corridor level, but they're a big step, and I personally think the first of many big steps. Canada is changing a lot, and I think the days of massive highway expansion are mostly behind us. The idea of building even just a new 4-lane suburban highway in the GTHA is incredibly unpopular. And more people are ditching cars, living in dense housing, and riding bikes around. While it's taken us a really long time to get to a place where riding transit and cycling are the preferred way of getting around our cities, I think the changes are going to be coming much more quickly in the future. But we really need to shape these changes. Well, I think basically every transit project I've talked about in this video so far has helped shape the Quebec City-Windsor corridor into one where people are transit first. There's a lot more we can do. I don't think we think nearly enough about having transit projects in this entire region have connecting that region be part of their key raison d'etre. But we should. A new rail line in Waterloo is great for Waterloo, but it's not only great for Waterloo. It also means a student from Kingston can easily take a VIA train to Toronto, a GO train to Waterloo, and then an ION train to the university. Or something similar for a professor in Quebec City who needs to go to a conference. If we're going to build high-speed rail or even just frequent electric rail in the corridor, then we need to start thinking about our transit projects in terms of how they connect up to that major corridor. And with that in mind, I wanted to close the video by highlighting some obvious projects that make a ton of sense, especially in the context of an integrated Quebec City-Windsor corridor. For one, whatever transit project Quebec City ends up building, be it tram, monorail, or electric trolleybus, it should definitely connect to both the airport and the Via Rail station in the city center. That creates a ton of value for the entire network because it connects up two more major transit hubs. Dorval Station and the REM also need some work. Montreal is blessed to basically get a free, through-running mainline rail station right at its airport. But right now, it's just a bit too far of a walk to comfortably make with your suitcases, especially if you're in the middle of a longer trip, say from Kingston to Montreal on the Via train, and then from Montreal to city in Europe, for example. There's a bunch of ways we could fix this. The cheapest is probably some sort of pedestrian priority corridor on the surface, but a nicer solution would be an underground pedestrian link with moving sidewalks and the like. The best solution is probably some sort of rail link that connects Dorval Station to the terminal itself, and while that could be a people mover, the obvious option is to extend the existing rail link at the airport terminal, the REM, to Dorval Station. Of course, the actual train station does need a lot of love. It should have a modern station building with more and larger waiting areas and a nice pickup drop-off area that acts as a remote gateway to the airport terminals, where you can also connect to intercity and local buses. There should also probably be a Via station on the West Island akin to Guildwood in Toronto, which serves Scarborough. In the big cities, these kinds of solutions on the edge make a lot of sense for the suburban driver who could just as easily drive to their final destination, and who definitely don't want to backtrack into the city center to catch an intercity train that probably isn't going to be a lot faster than driving. Montreal and Ottawa, for that matter, desperately both need an integrated suburban train system akin to the one being built in Toronto. Having regular, half-hourly trains that go out to regional destinations is a super useful service, not only for people living in the region, but for people connecting from an intercity train. Such services also help justify having nicer urban train stations when there aren't all that many intercity services that are actually using them. And even if Ottawa and Montreal can't get it together negotiating with freight railroads and laying their own tracks for suburban trains, they should at least be able to utilize the dedicated tracks that Via wants to build for intercity service, since they're going to have way more capacity than they need just for intercity trains. There's also a ton of different things that the GTHA would benefit from a through-running Pearson Airport train station, to a rail link between the University of Guelph and the University of Waterloo, tram train anyone, to an extension of rail to downtown Niagara Falls, which should really be an entertainment and tourism hub for the entire of the Quebec City-Windsor corridor. I can also imagine low-cost O-Train or TexRail style interurban rail services connecting up smaller communities that might not be directly on a main GO or Via line, but have old rail right-of-ways and demand for better transit service. Now, I haven't talked about them a ton in this video or in others, but there are a ton of smaller cities along the corridor that we should help develop sustainably on transit. Not only by providing really frequent regional express trains, which Via could provide in the future, particularly in areas like southwestern Ontario, but also by doing things like, for example, building higher order electric BRT systems to provide a structure to these smaller cities, such as Windsor, London, Kingston, and Trois-Rivières. These cities are all actually pretty big and all have substantial universities, and so providing better internal transit connections as well as ones to intercity rail stations provides a ton of value, not only locally but to the entire corridor. And there just isn't nearly enough focus on these in-between destinations. Kingston, for example, has one of Via's busiest stations, and yet it's very unimpressive. It doesn't have platform canopies or large internal waiting spaces or even modern buildings. Stations like this should really be transport hubs for their entire cities, connecting intercity trains as well as buses and local transit, with mixed-use development that can help fund everything, but can also provide useful places for people to wait and grab a bite to eat before they travel. Of course, we desperately need to electrify our intercity rail services, which also has the lovely rising tide lifts all boats effect of also helping us to electrify our suburban rail systems where they run on the same corridors, as I talked about before. But this also has a longer-term value. It reduces emissions, improves performance, and shrinks maintenance costs, allowing Via to keep running trains at high frequencies, even if the funding isn't always there. Electric trains can also go faster, and while we don't exactly know what's going to happen on the high-speed rail front, Via could obviously start running more trains, faster trains, and removing level crossings long before we're going to get a Canadian TGV. And while we can and should be moving on projects like this that create so many valuable connections in this densely populated part of Canada, the truth is that there are also policy issues we really need to think about. Canadian cities already have good transit, but it's a mix of different wayfinding, payment, and trip planning systems. It's going to sound bold, but standardizing things like our wayfinding from city to city would make using transit so much more convenient and easy, especially for people traveling from out of town. At the very least, we should also think about creating interoperable payment card systems. So I could use my Presto card in Montreal, and someone from Montreal could use their Opus card in Waterloo region, if not moving to an entirely integrated single card system, like for example the Netherlands. We don't just want university students and young professionals making massive rail journeys, we want grandma too as well, and for that to happen it has to be simple and easy. Fortunately, I think a transit megaregion is finally emerging, from Quebec City to Windsor, and I'm really excited about it. Thanks for watching.